That was our good friend Dean Sluyter, and very interesting. I mean, he covered a lot of ground, and obviously an area he's given a lot of thought to, and it's very kind of adventuresome to go out and actually teach meditation on one's own and give guidance in those areas. But he seems to have a very balanced and well-developed perspective on it.
Well, there's something to be said for nearly half a century of exploration
Hmm.
and research and participation and learning. So he brings it all to the table, and I'm sure people have quibbles, but he's providing a service for many people who would not necessarily be reached or by more traditional channels.
Hmm.
Dean, is one of the number of independent teachers not attached to a particular lineage, and he's reaching people who would not otherwise be reached.
Hmm. And I should say, from years ago, back in the late 70s, early 80s, or whatever, or through the 80s and into the 90s, I think, Dean was a teacher at the Pingree School, which is a very well-known private high school in New Jersey. He taught a course where they read books like Siddhartha and Lost Horizons and The Razor's Edge and books on spirituality. And as part of the coursework in his class, which was an elective, kids learned to meditate. And I think
Right,
like 80 kids a year learned meditation at the school. And he had
right.
a huge influence there, and it was very well received. Matter of fact, I don't know, 20 years ago, I was visiting Dean in New Jersey, and I sat in on one of his classes, and it was terrific to have that in high school.
Right.
Yeah, he in many ways way ahead
All
of his
right.
time.
I'm going to reveal an inside
All
story
right,
now.
we want that.
Uh, the course Dean taught was called, I think, something like the Literature of Enlightenment,
Yeah,
and I actually played some role in his ending up getting that teaching job at
really. Tell
Pingree.
tell us the story.
Well, no, I knew the headmaster, and he was looking for somebody, and I recommended Dean, so I didn't really have much to do with it, but I made the connection. So Dean was teaching something like the Literature of Enlightenment, and as you said, it was a wonderful thing. He was using works of uh, fiction and nonfiction, and teaching them to meditate at that in those days TM. So my first book comes out, and it's a book about TM, about transcendental meditation in the mid late 70s, while he's teaching. And when he invents the course, we had a little inside joke that I always loved. The course description read something like, it described the course, and then it said authors will include Faulkner, Salinger, I forget who else, and Goldberg.
Goldberg. Oh, it's
Because he used my book on TM as one of the sources, and we always loved that that little inside joke.
that's like being in the lineup with Mantle Maris and
That's right. That's
Moose
right.
Gowron or whatever. So it's like that's fantastic. You know what? I'm sure he made very good use of it. Yeah, it was a wonderful thing. I think old school should have that.
That's
I wanted to get back to one of the things I asked him about was, my experience in teaching meditation is, and the reality was most people almost always love it, but few people are regular with it. And I think it's the part of that is unless you live in a family where everybody's doing it or in a community where everybody's doing that to support that, it takes even if it's not a meditation technique that involves effort, there's effort that goes into working it into your daily schedule. And I think I always was regular with meditation because I tend to be a compulsive person. But had I not had that imbalance, I don't know. It would. And also, I think the other thing that kept me going with meditation over the years was the promise of higher states of consciousness that you were
mm.
actually working towards something. But what is was that your experience where most people?
Actually, I always said no. I agree. Keeping people remembering to do it regularly. I run into that a lot and have over the years, and I've had to write about it and talk about it, regardless of the meditation technique. I mean, for one thing, one of the things I've noticed is people find it, if they start to find meditation less pleasant, then they're more likely to stop. And one of the things I value about Dean's work is the emphasis on effortlessness
Right.
and naturalness. I mean, we know from being meditation teachers from the old days that the more people try and the more they strain and the more they try to make something happen, the less pleasant it is and the less fulfilling, and then they're more likely to say, oh, this isn't working for me anymore, I'm going to stop. That's one thing. The other thing I've noticed is that, people just don't make the time. And everybody's lives are busier now than ever. And so taking the time to set aside for meditation is even more of a challenge than it was in the 70s, and it was a big challenge then.
Right.
And I always used to say that one of the things I'm grateful for is that when I learned to meditate, I didn't have any responsibilities. I was a single guy. I had some job where, that was very flexible, and I didn't, have to commute or get on the subway, and God knows no children to take care of. And I valued it very much, so I did it regularly, long enough, because it had immediate benefit to me. I was so screwed up, I could feel it. And so I would keep doing it. And then after a while, when it became routine, which is when people will, people sort of, maybe they come to meditation because they feel a lot of tension and they feel a lot of stress, or their doctor tells them to, and once they get over those initial benefits, they think, well, I don't need this anymore. And they don't keep up with, erroneously, they think it's done its job, and they don't have a sense of it continuing to benefit them over the long term. That wasn't a problem for me in those days because I wasn't distracted by responsibility. So I did it long enough to see the real value of it, and I continued to.
I was home for the summer. It was like, I had a job working at a swimming pool. I had also not a lot of responsibility, So I had that for a few months, and that got me some footing on it and some regularity. Plus, I had a lot of contact.
I want to add to that, Dennis. Yeah. The other thing we had was the community factor, and we didn't get into that enough with Dean. And one of the sort of interesting features of the modern spiritual scene is that people value their independence, and they're eclectic. They have many teachers, and they are wary of getting too caught up in an organization or a tradition, and and having to conform, and so they retain their independence. But the downside of that is you can lose the connection to community, and it's being in the presence of community where people reinforce these good habits of meditating regularly and staying on the path. So that's a challenge for
right. It's
for
interesting for our listeners that don't know this. Phil is in the midst of writing a biography on Paramahansa Yogananda, and one of the things I remember reading about him was that, especially toward the end of his life, he was talking a lot about communities where like-minded people whose emphasis was meditation, was self-realization, would live together and do all the things of life, but that it would be more reinforced when they had communities where that was valued.
That's right, and you meditate together, which it sort of amplifies the benefits. But the other thing you have often in a community is a vision of a long-term value of having a regular spiritual practice, a sadhana, as they would say in Sanskrit. And it's not a coincidence that Buddha's teachings, they talk about the 3 gems of Buddhism, and one of them is Sangha, the community. And so that's a factor. Now there's online communities. Maybe that's helping us, to, in
Hmm.
a certain sense. And people are having sort of more makeshift communities of like-minded
Hmm.
souls. And there's still plenty of lineage groups, that provide community. So,
Right.
as Dean was saying, the having a guru, can be a mixed affair where there's benefits but also hazards, and the same is true of community.
Right, but and it brings together people that are like-minded. I want to share one thing with our listeners, and that is uh, years ago, back in the '70s, the three of us, Phil, and Dean, and we were all on a mountaintop in Switzerland for 8 weeks, spending many hours every day in meditation. And one of our fellow course participants, who we had a lot of fun with, was the comedian Andy Kaufman, who was a very serious meditator, very spiritual guy, and that was quite a time, and it's where I really got to know you and Dean, and
Yeah,
yeah, a great. And if anybody that has the opportunity to go on a well supervised, well structured program where you can really spend much of every day in meditation and other spiritual activities and spiritual readings and whatnot, you can really get a tremendous amount out of it.
yeah,
But that was quite an experience on that. What
yeah.
was it called?
Actually,
Tion
what's that?
2000. What was the name of the
I
place
can't
we?
remember, but it was way up in the mountains. It was one of many that we would
Right,
go on at those days, but that was particularly memorable because of the fun we had
right.
and Andy's presence. But I should say that in Dean's book, in Natural Meditation, he has a chapter on retreats,
Hmm.
um, and the value of that. And many people know that there's many opportunities and places to do that independently or in the context of a spiritual organization. But I would emphasize, as you did, that it should be well supervised and well structured. And for a new meditator or a beginning person to go off on his or her own and to a campsite or a log cabin or something and just meditate all day may not be
Yeah,
a very good
definitely would not
idea.
recommend that.
But wouldn't it be great if it's you made me wish that we could interview Andy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, sometime we can we do a show and tell stories, or bring on some old friends that know him from the his meditation days. So, anyway, so another fun one, and I want to say those
Maybe
listening out
Tony
there.
Clifton is
Yeah,
available.
one of his alter egos. I don't know. God knows what he would say. That might be a tough one. But yeah, please email us. Let us know what you think, what you like, what you don't like, any recommendations for guests, because we would love to hear from you. And we have some wonderful shows coming up, and but always open to suggestion. Till next time, Phil.
Good to see you, Dennis, or see you. I'm not seeing you. Good to talk to you as
Over and
always.
out. All right.
Bye.